week before my wedding, the world felt off-kilter. You know that feeling when you're on a roller coaster right at the peak just before the drop? That was me. The plans, the guests, the decorations, all these things were supposed to be filling me with excitement. Instead, a strange unease had settled over me, centered entirely around my fiancé, Ayan. He smiled, he laughed, he played the part of the happy groom-to-be perfectly. But his eyes were miles away. I tried to dismiss it as pre-wedding jitters, the enormous stress of planning such a huge event. So I ignored it. I pushed the feeling down. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, surrounded by stacks of invitations and guest lists. I was holding a pen, carefully circling the names of our closest friends and family. The air was quiet, filled only with the soft scratch of my pen on paper. Then, out of nowhere, Ayan said it, his tone so casual it was chilling. "By the way, my ex, Sarah, is coming too." My hand froze mid-circle. It felt like my heartbeat had slowed to a crawl. I lifted my head, my eyes searching his, desperately hoping he would crack a smile and say he was joking. But he didn't. His gaze was fixed on his phone, scrolling through something, as if he'd just mentioned inviting a distant cousin, not the woman he once told me he loved. I managed to keep my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "So, you invited her?" He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just shrugged. "Yeah, we're still friends. It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. It was a massive deal. Not because I was some jealous, insecure fiancé, but because this was supposed to be our wedding, my day. And he hadn't even thought to ask me. He just made the decision, as if my feelings were irrelevant. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't start an argument, I just gave a slow, deliberate nod. But in that moment, something inside me shifted, hardened. The first crack in the foundation had appeared. After that night, Ayan's behavior became even more suspicious. He started taking calls in another room, his voice hushed. His thumbs would fly across his phone screen, replying to messages with a speed I'd never seen before. Sometimes a small, secret smile would play on his lips as he read something. His phone, which used to be left lying around, was now guarded like a national treasure. The second I walked into a room, he'd snatch it up. He changed his lock screen password. He turned off all his message previews. The red flags were no longer just flags. They were giant flashing neon signs, and it was impossible to ignore them anymore. 2 days later, I decided to run a little test. We were having dinner at my place, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. I leaned forward, my voice barely a whisper. "Do you still have feelings for her?" He physically recoiled, choking on a sip of water. Then came the laughter. Too loud, too forced, utterly fake. "Of course not," he scoffed. "Don't be so dramatic." He said it with such bravado, but his eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. They were the eyes of a liar. That same night, as he slept beside me, his phone on the nightstand suddenly lit up the dark room. A message preview flashed across the screen for a split second, but it was long enough for me to read. "I can't wait to see you again." The sender? Sarah. My stomach didn't just drop. It plummeted into a black hole. Again. The word echoed in my mind. It wasn't just that he'd invited her. It wasn't just that they were supposedly friends. She was seeing him. Before our wedding, a hot wave of anger washed over me, but something else rose with it, a cold, dangerous calm. This wasn't the time for tears or shouting matches. I didn't wake him up. I didn't confront him with the sliver of evidence I had. I needed concrete proof, not a dramatic scene that he could twist and turn against me. The next morning, I put on the performance of a lifetime. I was the happy, loving fiancé. I smiled. I helped my mom with the floral arrangements. I sent my bridesmaids pictures of my wedding dress. Ayan was completely oblivious. He had no idea that I knew that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. Later that evening, he made a mistake. He left his phone on the coffee table while he went to the bathroom. My hands trembled, but my resolve was firm. I picked it up. The password had been changed, just as I suspected, but I'm observant. I had caught him typing it in from the corner of my eye earlier that day. My fingers moved quickly. 1, 4, 7, 8. Unlocked. And there it was. Message after message, a digital trail of his betrayal, late-night chats that stretched into the early morning hours, flirtatious voice notes, pictures I couldn't bring myself to look at too closely. The words on the screen were like tiny daggers to the heart. "I miss us," one message from her read. And then the one that broke me and rebuilt me in the same instant from him, "One last time before the wedding." My heart didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. But I didn't cry. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. Instead, that dangerous calm I felt earlier solidified into something cold and sharp as steel. Instead of throwing his phone against the wall, instead of screaming at him until my throat was raw, I did something he would never, ever expect. I opened his chat with Sarah, and with shaking but determined fingers, I typed a message from his phone. "See you at the wedding." At the wedding, not before, not in some secret rendezvous. She would show up expecting to be a special guest, a lingering presence. If Ayan wanted to play games, I was going to end them in the most public way imaginable, where everyone we knew and loved would be a witness. And I already knew exactly what I was going to say. For the next 2 days, I was a ghost haunting my own life. I watched him, this man I was supposed to marry, as he lived in his bubble of lies. He kept pretending everything was perfect. He'd hug me, kiss my forehead, and whisper, "I love you so much." And I'd smile back, a serene, knowing smile, all while the storm he couldn't see gathered force around him. The wedding hall was breathtaking. Flowers, lights, the gentle melody of a string quartet warming up. It was the picture of a fairy tale. Our guests would be arriving in just 2 days, and I knew Sarah would be among them, dressed to the nines, walking in with a confident smirk, thinking she still held some power over him, over us. She had no idea she was walking into my arena, my stage. Ayan kept looking at me with a flicker of concern. "You're so quiet. Is everything okay?" I would just smile and pat his arm. "Everything's perfect." And it was. It was perfectly poised for the end. Because on my wedding day, when the officiant asked us to exchange our vows, when all eyes were on us, when he leaned in to kiss his bride, I would whisper one sentence in his ear, a sentence that would wipe that smug smile off his face, freeze his lies in his throat, and silence the entire hall. And in that moment of deafening silence, he would finally understand. You don't invite your ex to your wedding, especially when your fiancé already knows the truth. The wedding day felt like a dream, but not the good kind. The hall was a fairy tale of warm lights and soft flowers, the music a gentle melody that should have filled me with joy. Instead, my mind was a block of ice, sharp and cold, just waiting. I sat in the bridal room, a vision in red as everyone buzzed around me. "You're stunning," they'd say. "Ayan is so lucky." I'd smile, a perfect practice smile, while inside my heart was a ticking clock. Ayan hadn't seen me yet. I knew how this would go. He'd play the part of the perfect, doting groom, as if our world wasn't a fragile web of his lies. The moment came. I entered the hall, and as if on cue, everyone rose. Cheers, applause, beaming faces. It was a picture-perfect scene from a movie, and there he was, at the center of it all, waiting on the stage. His smile was dazzling, the kind that could fool anyone into believing he was the ideal man. But I knew the darkness that lurked behind it. As I approached, his expression softened into one of feigned adoration. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "You look beautiful," he whispered. I met his gaze, my own smile unwavering, and whispered back, "Let's enjoy the evening." He had no idea what storm was about to break. For the first hour, we played our parts flawlessly. We posed for pictures, accepted hugs from teary-eyed relatives, and moved through the crowd like a royal couple. Ayan held my hand, his grip possessive as if to convince himself that everything was fine. But then the main doors swung open, and she walked in. Sarah. She was dressed to kill, her steps confident, her chin held high. Her smile was aimed directly at Ian, as if this was her coronation, not my wedding. I felt it instantly, the brief, almost imperceptible freeze in Ian's posture. His fingers tightened around mine, a tiny tell that betrayed his shock. He hadn't expected her to be this bold, this brazen. He leaned in, his lips barely moving, a frantic whisper escaping. I didn't think she would actually show up. A calm, almost serene smile spread across my face. "Why not?" I replied coolly. "You invited her." He swallowed hard, a flicker of panic igniting in his eyes. He didn't know. He didn't know that I was the one who had sent the real invitation. Sarah glided towards the stage, a magnet for every eye in the room. The whispers started, a ripple of confusion spreading through the guests. Some recognized her, their expressions shifting from celebration to curiosity. Others just sensed it, that electric tension that hangs in the air before a lightning strike. When she finally reached us, she looked straight at Ayan, her voice a soft purr. "Congratulations." But her eyes told a different story, one of shared secrets and stolen moments. Ayan dropped my hand and took a half step back, a clumsy attempt to appear casual. The nervous twitch at the corner of his mouth gave him away. He wanted this moment to pass, to be swallowed by the noise of the party. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I turned to Sarah and offered her a polite, almost welcoming smile. "Thank you for coming." That threw her. She wasn't expecting an ally. She thought I was the oblivious, heartbroken bride. Ian grew more agitated. We should go greet the other guests," he stammered, desperate for an escape. I didn't budge. Instead, I moved closer to him, draping my arm around his in a gesture of bridal affection. Every camera in the room swiveled towards us. A hush fell over the stage, and then, in a voice as soft as a prayer, I whispered a single sentence into his ear, a sentence that drained all the color from his face. "I know everything, every message, every meeting, every lie." His perfect smile evaporated. His eyes widened in sheer terror. For a long, silent second, he forgot to breathe. He knew. He knew exactly what I meant, and he knew there was no escape. "Please," he begged in a choked whisper, "don't do this here." I kept my sweet smile fixed in place. "You did," I whispered back. He reached for my hand again, a desperate, pleading gesture, but I gently pulled it away. The guests closest to the stage were starting to notice. The jovial atmosphere was dissolving, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable silence. The music seemed to fade into the background. Sarah looked back and forth between us, her confident smirk replaced by confusion. She couldn't hear our whispers, but she could see the raw fear on Ayan's face. He leaned in again, his voice cracking. "We can talk later. Not here. Please." I smiled, a brilliant, radiant smile for the cameras. It would probably be the most beautiful photo of the night. "Why later?" I asked, my voice still a whisper but laced with steel. "You brought her here. Let her here too." He was trapped, utterly and completely trapped. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead. His hands trembled. Sarah stepped closer, her voice now laced with concern. "Is everything okay?" That was my cue. I straightened up and dropped the whisper. My voice was calm, clear, and loud enough for them both to hear. "I saw the messages." Time stopped. Ayan's heart stopped. Sarah's face contorted, a mask of shock and guilt. She stumbled back a step, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. The entire hall was now silent, a theater of spectators watching our private drama unfold. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to cry. My composure was my weapon. I looked from Ayan's pale face to Sarah's and back again. "Let's continue," I said, my voice even. "We can finish the wedding, or we can end it right now. It all depends on Ayan." He looked like a cornered animal, sweating and shaking under the bright lights. He had expected tears, hysterics, a dramatic scene he could manage. He never expected this cold, calculated silence, and he knew with chilling certainty that this silence was far more destructive than any shouting match could ever be. Because the night was far from over, and I had more than just words, I had proof, and I was just getting started. The silence in the hall was deafening. I stood there, frozen, trying to force a smile for our guests, but my hands were trembling so violently I had to clench them into fists. Across from me, Ayan's face was a mask of panic, and next to him, Sarah. She looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. The air was thick with confusion. Our guests knew something was deeply, terribly wrong, but they were too afraid to even whisper. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the air fill my lungs, steadying my voice. Ayan, I said, my voice soft but carrying through the stillness. You owe everyone here honesty, but most of all, you owe it to me. He stepped closer, his voice a harsh, desperate whisper. Please, not here. Don't make a scene. We can talk about this in private. A scene? He thought this was about making a scene? I turned to face our friends and family, my lips curving into a calm, almost serene smile. Oh, there won't be a scene, I assured them, and him. Just the truth. I pulled out my phone. The screen cast a pale, incriminating light on my face as I unlocked it. His messages were right there. The voice notes filled with words he never said to me. His secret promises to Sarah. Ayan's face went bone white. He lunged forward, his hand outstretched. Give me the phone. We don't need to show this to everyone. I took a step back, holding the phone close. No one needs to see it, I said, my voice even. I just want you to admit it. Right here. Right now. He just stared at me, his jaw tight, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. Silence. The guests started leaning in, their whispers growing louder. My family exchanged worried glances. Sarah just kept shaking her head, a look of pure disbelief on her face as if she couldn't comprehend that this was actually happening. Finally, Ayan's shoulders slumped in defeat. His voice was so small, I almost didn't hear it. Okay, I made a mistake. A mistake. That's what he called it. Months of lies. Months of cheating, of hiding another woman, of inviting his ex-girlfriend to our wedding, was just a mistake. A small, insignificant slip-up. I stared at him, and in that moment, the man I thought I loved vanished. The man I had planned to spend my life with, to build a future with, was gone. In his place stood a coward. A weak, spineless man who chose lies over love, deceit over devotion. I walked over to the stage, picked up the microphone, and felt a strange sense of power as my fingers wrapped around it. My voice, when I spoke, was perfectly steady. I wasn't going to ruin this day, I began, my eyes sweeping across the stunned faces. I wasn't going to scream or cry or fight, but a wedding day is supposed to be about a promise of loyalty, of trust, and of honesty. And I refused to marry someone who broke that promise before we even had a chance to make it. Ayan's panic was palpable. Wait, please, he begged, rushing towards the stage. I can explain everything. I'll change. Just don't walk away. He reached for my hand, but this time I pulled away. I wouldn't let him touch me. Just then, a figure rose from the front row. It was my father. He walked purposefully toward the stage, and for a heart-stopping second, I thought he was coming to scold me, to tell me to handle this disgrace privately. But he didn't. He walked right up beside me and placed a firm, supportive hand on my shoulder. He looked at Ayan. His eyes filled not with anger, but with a deep, profound disappointment that was somehow worse. If she can find it in her heart to forgive you, then maybe we can continue, my father said, his voice slow and heavy. But the choice is hers, not yours. Every eye in the room turned to me. The weight of their gaze was immense, but I didn't look at Ayan. I turned to Sarah. She looked so small now, all her earlier confidence completely gone. You came here today thinking you still had him, I said, my voice quiet just for her. But if he truly loved you, he would be with you. He wouldn't be hiding you, lying to me, and standing at the altar with someone else. You weren't winning anything. You were just being used. Her eyes welled up with tears and she didn't even try to argue. She just lowered her head in shame. The hall fell silent once more. Just give me one more chance, Ayan whispered, his voice shaking with unshed tears. I finally looked into his eyes, searching for the man I once knew. But he wasn't there. And in that moment, I realized something incredible. I wasn't falling apart. I wasn't hurting. I wasn't lost. I felt free. A wedding is supposed to be the start of a new life, not the destruction of one. And I refused to build my future on a foundation of lies. So, calmly and with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, I said the words, I'm ending this, not because of her, because of you. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Ayan lunged for the microphone, his face a mess of desperation. Please, listen to me, don't do this. But I had already stepped back. My father signaled to the band, and the music died. He gestured to the event staff, and the bright, celebratory lights softened into a gentle glow. The party was over. People started to stand, unsure of what to do. A few of my mother's friends came over and wrapped me in silent, comforting hugs. Some of Ayan's friends pulled him aside, their faces grim as they asked him what on earth he had done. Through the crowd, I saw Sarah slip out a side door, tears streaming down her face. I walked out of the hall and into the cool evening air. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in weeks, a breath without fear, without doubt, without a constant gnawing pain in my chest. And then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It read, You did the right thing. You deserve better. I looked up, confused. A man was standing a few feet away. A quiet guest I hadn't noticed before. The one who had watched the whole thing unfold without a word. He walked closer. I'm Ayan's cousin, he said gently. I knew he wasn't loyal. I always wished someone would finally stand up to him. I was too stunned to say anything. He added, his voice soft and respectful. If you ever need help with anything, just let me know. You're not alone. His words weren't romantic or dramatic. They were just kind. Genuine support from a near stranger when I needed it most. And suddenly, it hit me. A wedding ending wasn't a tragedy. It was a beginning. Standing there under the quiet stars, I began to remove the heavy bridal jewelry piece by piece. My hands were steady. There were no tears. I just felt strong. Inside the hall, I could hear Ayan's raised voice, shouting, trying to explain himself to people who no longer wanted to listen. That was his mess to clean up. My future was freedom. I took a step forward, then another, slow and steady, walking away from the wreckage and toward something bigger, something real. A life that would be built on truth, a love that would never need to be hidden, a future that, for the first time, was truly and completely my own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It means the world to me. See you next time.